Hey everybody, Mike here from Son of a Witch podcast. So just wanted to pop on really quick. This episode is going to jump right into the mix with Madame Pamita. Madame Pamita is an amazing author. She makes the most amazing magical candles that you've ever seen. She has a book called The Book of Candle Magic. She has a book on tarot magic, and she has a new book called Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, which is coming out very, very soon. This episode is releasing the day of the official release of the book, which is Friday, April the 8th. So by the time you're listening to this, you should go to Parlor of Wonders, Parlour of Wonders.com, and you will be able to find not only the book, but all of the other amazing things that she has to offer. So just going to do this real quick introduction for you. Rania is still sleeping by the time I am recording this in Greece. They are a good many hours ahead of us here on the East Coast in the States. But aside from that, there's not going to be any segments this week. This episode was about, I would say, 2 hours and 5 minutes long is the recording time that we had with her. And I did not want to cut out any of it because it's all amazing content, much like the last episode with Reverend Paul Meserly. So I am going to be releasing this as well in 2 parts. So when the first episode comes out, you will have time to, or the first part comes out, you will have time to listen. And then probably within 8 to 12 hours later, I will have part 2 ready to go as well. Been a little bit under the weather the past few days, came down with something, so I am playing a little bit of catch up, but we'll get it all out there for you. Now, after this week, next week, we have an exciting episode on manifestation. Morgan will be back with Morgan's Meanderings, and hopefully we will get another update from Michelle. Keep in mind that when you're done listening to this, keep an eye out, if not already released, for part 2, because it will pick up immediately where this part 1 has left off. And in the meantime, if you listen on Apple Podcast and you love the show, please take time to leave a review, even if it's just clicking whatever stars you want to do. We love 5-star ratings if you think it's worthy of that. And if you have time to write out a nice review, we would love that as well. If you listen on Spotify or iHeartRadio or Pandora or Amazon Music, wherever you listen, subscribe to the show or follow or whatever that respective platform does so that it'll keep you updated when the new episodes come out. Keep an eye out on the YouTube channel as well, because Reverend Paul Meserly's episode will be coming soon. And then also the Madame Pamita episode will go to YouTube about a week after this airs. Other than that, I hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, Mike D and Rania, your awesome host, and we are here with the amazing Madame Pamita, who has graced us with her presence and is going to let us pick her brain a little bit on her process and what got her started, etc. So I have been a fan of what you do with Parlor of Wonders for a long time. Your spell kits are amazing. Your YouTube videos are awesome. There's one, it's a prosperity spell that you did on a plate about a year ago, and I do that one often. It's one of my favorite ones. But yeah, I've been a fan of that for a long time. I was a fan of your books. Then Candle Magic came along, and I'm a huge Candle Magic fan in general. And I told Rania, I have read a lot of books on the subject. And I think I've even said on Instagram a few times, this is hands down, and I'm not just saying this to butter you up, but it's just, in my opinion, hands down, the most comprehensive and approachable dive into candle magic that I've ever been able to read. So I've read it numerous times. I've dog-eared it. And if you can tell, this amazing gold foil stamping is even wearing down now because I use it so often. It's a really good book, and your books are just I'm a fan of conversational style books that teach you, but it feels like you're sitting at a table or on a Zoom call having a conversation, and your books are like that. So thank you for giving that to us. Most recently, and we'll talk about this a little bit too. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing on behalf of the Ukraine. And we'll let the listeners kind of in a little bit find out a little more as to why that's so close to your heart. But a huge fan of that. The show is also doing what we can to help out. And so we definitely want to touch on that. But Rania, why don't you go ahead and start us off? I'm going to dive deep down the rabbit hole into like your origin story and everything, but I'll turn it over to my beautiful co-host. That's why I brought her on here, because nobody wants to look at this all the time. So, we bring her on.
Well, like Mike said, the books were amazing. Within 6 hours, I read both of them. Very thorough, you couldn't leave the book. Like I couldn't stop reading at all. And my favorite, because I do love tarot so much, the tarot book really, it was so thorough. Like it explained everything the way that someone's supposed to explain it to you, like how to use it in magic, the different ways and the explanations of everything. That was my favorite book of all. I do love candle magic, but tarot is very close to me. Like it's one of the tools that I use a lot, and that helped a lot.
She's the tarot expert of the show for sure.
Thank you guys so much. Oh my gosh. I feel like you just like filled up my tank for the next month of all that beautiful words that you said to me. Oh my gosh. That's so sweet. And thank you so much, because you hit on like what I want my books to do. I want my books to feel like we're sitting down and I'm showing you what I know and showing you what I've learned, and so that my joy and my passion is to see people expand and be empowered. It's very interesting because I've been a witch a long time. Mm-hmm. And I remember back in the 90s, the 80s and 90s, people saying, "Oh, you shouldn't teach other people magic." And I'm like, why and I understand like a powerful thing, and you kind of quote unquote don't want to end up in the wrong hands kind of thing, but I don't. That's not me. I think that's a way of looking at the world that isn't my worldview, which is that the individual people need to be empowered. We need to empower people. Organized religion has kept, in my opinion, people from having access. So what witchcraft to me means is that the people have the power, the individual has the power. That's why historically, especially in Western Europe, witches were destroyed. Why? Because they had power, and we wanted the institution to have power. And so I feel like it's so important to empower the individual. So and I think what you relate to probably in the books is that nothing is held back. I don't keep secrets. I'm not a person who's like, you need to be initiated into this to receive this information. I'm a person that's like free sharing of information. Mm-hmm. I come from old school punk rock, so it's all about power to the people, So yeah. So you got what I'm trying to do in my books is trying to give the information, put the information in people's hands, and let them empower the individual. So that's what I'm about.
Yeah, you have a very Ramones vibe about you, so I can see the punk rock. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
I'm curious because I know that you have been a witch, as you said, for a long time, and I'm a huge comic book fan, so I always kind of go back to these types of things. But I love origin stories. Like I love finding out where someone got their start, what sparked that, and what led them to where they are. So I'm curious, at what point, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. For instance, with me in this show, I have been a witch for 30 plus years. Did I ever see myself doing a podcast that was going to reach 30 plus countries? No. And kind of like what you said in that same vein, it puts a different added pressure of, I'm putting this information out there, I'm empowering these people, which is what I want to do. But then you feel almost a responsibility at times because you don't want. So I'm very careful about what I say. But anyway, all that to say, I'm sure you were a witch before you became Madam Pamita. So what kind of led to that? I'm curious.
Well, I have a Lord Cabot connection in that. believe it or
Wow.
not. I'll tell you the little story. So I grew up, my dad's side of the family is Scottish, English, and Irish. My mom's side of the family, Ukrainian. My grandparents came from Ukraine and immigrated during what part of the world, it was actually Galicia when they left, but it became Poland and Ukraine, that country. And they were ethnic Ukrainians and came to Philadelphia when Russians were trying to conscript men and boys into the army. And my uncle and my grandfather, my great uncle, sorry, left. And then my grandmother joined them and came to Philadelphia. So it was, a diaspora again, just like this thing that we're seeing now with the refugees. They were refugees, but they left to just start a new life in America. But so that being said, my mom's side of the family were very magical. They were doing Catholic magic, which I think, you can have witchcraft, Catholic witchcraft, Jewish witchcraft, any religion can have witchcraft. And so we were doing Catholic magic. I grew up in a magical household. I say my first candle magic was lighting a candle in a Catholic church, that was like as a child, infant, you just had this as part of your daily practice. And it wasn't seen as anything evil, wrong, bad, or anything like that. My grandmother was, my Ukrainian grandmother was a healer. She did what's called Vilivadi Visk, which is a wax healing, pouring beeswax into a bowl of water over someone's head. And you use a knife and you do these cuttings and cleansings and things like that. So working with poppets and things like that, that was all part of my heritage and growing up. So we learned these things, oral tradition. It wasn't documented anywhere. It wasn't part of anything. It was just something that we did. So it wasn't I was very, very fortunate that I grew up in a time, 60s and 70s, that magic was just starting to be visible. It wasn't yet the 80s when we had the satanic panic and evangelicals saying how Dungeons and Dragons is going to take you to hell and all this other BS, right? So I grew up in a very free time, 70s was very free. There was lots of witchcraft starting to pop up and things like that. Well, when I was 10 years old in 1974, my sister lived in Boston, and my family took a trip to Salem to, just like a day trip. We went to Salem and we went into a witch shop. Well, in 1974, the only witch shop was Lori Cabot's shop. And my mom said, you can pick out a souvenir here. And I picked out a miniature Rider-Waite deck. That's what I wanted at 10 years old. And I took the deck home. I loved anything fortune telling and astrology when I was a kid. That was accessible at that time, And I took that deck home and I looked at the little white book and I'm like, I do not even know how to begin to work with this. So I used to play with my tarot deck like paper dolls. I made the characters talk to one another. I made them have little adventures. I would do these things. So I didn't, I wasn't like a child prodigy that learned how to read tarot at 10, but I had tarot decks, Ouija boards, all kinds of magical things. They were not forbidden in our house. It was totally fine. You could be, in my mom's mind, you could be Catholic and do these things too. It wasn't a problem. So I was fortunate to grow up in that environment that was really very open about that, magical practices. Now, my mom wanted me to be Catholic and do those things, but, as soon as I turned 17, I'm like, see ya. And then I just went on my own path and studied Wicca for a long time and was part of covens and was doing a lot of feminist Wicca stuff and so on, but then became real solitary. And probably since the 90s have been since the late 90s have been solitary practitioner. And I really think of myself now as my practice has evolved. I mean, it's so beautiful to have a personal practice because it gets to evolve and grow and change and adapt and be very customized and personalized to you. So as I say about myself now, I'm a spiritualist animist. I love spiritualism. I love connecting with spirits, but I'm also see spirits in plants and the wind and the sun and start from that place. So I go back to really what we would say in popular parlance, like shamanic practices or really ancient, old magic, really go back to like the ancient beliefs about the life force and everything. So that's me in a nutshell. That's my journey. And that's how I started. That's my origin story. So it was, it was very, I've seen it for the last 57 years. I've seen the evolution of magic, witchcraft, and what has happened. And it's amazing to me. I would never in the 80s have thought we would have this openness about the occult and being a witch and all that has evolved and the empowerment of witches, which is, I think, an amazing thing. I love it so much. So yeah.
That's really awesome. I never knew you had that connection with Lori. So,
Oh my gosh, I bless her all the time. I mean, there would be no, I think in some ways there would be no part of me that had connected to tarot, or would have happened way, way later, because she had the boldness to have that shop and, to offer these things. I can guarantee you at 10 years old, it isn't like now for you youngins who don't remember. It's like, you can walk into a Barnes and Noble or a bookstore and you can find a tarot deck. And in the 70s, that was not the case. To find occult books, you had to like send off, or you had to be in a big city that had, a store that specialized in that. It was very difficult to get information and very difficult to find these things. And a little 10-year-old, what did I have access to? I had access to libraries, and I'm thankful for our libraries. I mean, I grew up in Santa Monica, California, and in Santa Monica, the public library had, in the kids section, they had books about ESP and ghosts and paranormal stuff. So I was able to get, and Sasquatch. I mean, this was the 70s, right? So I could get things like that. But in my junior high school library, in my middle school library, we had Sybil Leek books. I don't know what witch was working in the junior high school library, but there was Sybil Leek, Diary of a Witch. And I checked that book out and read it cover to cover and was like, okay, this is my handbook of what I have to do. Like any little drip of information. I was like so thirsty. Like I remember when I was about 10, 11, which is really when this really awakened in me. When I was about 10, I remember reading somewhere that witches, when they see the full moon in the sky, witches turn around 3 times and then bow to the moon. So I used to go out in my backyard and do that because I was like, okay, I found one little piece of information. I can do this thing. And so I used to do that when I'd see the full moon up in the sky. So it was so hard back then, so hard to get any information. And especially for a kid to get any information, it just wasn't like now where you can pop on the internet and find tons of information, So it was an interesting time. You would work hard to find your music and to find your magic. You had to really work hard.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's a really cool story. So we found out that you have a Cabot connection, which is awesome because we love Reverend Mother. She's amazing. And we are trying to do with this show, actually, we've got one of the elders coming on to record an episode. We're trying to kind of further her mission that she started so many years ago. But back to your origin story. So that was like your first taste of real, true living as a witch, like in-person type experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I would get little drips and drops and things here and there, but going into that shop and just, it's so interesting to me to like look back at the lens, I look back at the child and I go, wow, little me picked a tarot deck. That is so unusual for a kid. Why would, you know what I mean? Like that tells me there's some probably past life stuff, in terms of, why a child would choose that. That doesn't seem like a childlike toy or thing that a kid would want. And here I was so attracted to it. I'm going to say I bless Lori every day because of not only the courageous and bold work that she did to bring witchcraft out in the open. And really, and when you call her the Holy Mother and she is the mother because she gave birth to all of this of witchcraft in America, modern day witchcraft in America. I think it really stems from her, the people that she's trained, the people that, that have touched her at any touch point in the sense of going into the shop, for example, reading about her, her publicness about it at a time when witchcraft was very forbidden and you would have to be so closeted. I mean, I can remember even in the 80s and the 90s, even today, in a lot of places, people have to be very closeted about their beliefs and their practices. And the fact that she was so bold with no support, no one around her, she was that firebrand, that person that was the groundbreaker that impact cannot be overstated, the impact of that. So I bless her every day. I bless her every day because we would not have what we have today without her having her courage, her real courage, That takes a lot of boldness to put yourself out there and to be, knowing that you're going to be attacked and vilified and slandered and all kinds of things. And for her strength to be able to do that so boldly and so beautifully is just it can't be overstated, the impact of that. So beautiful, the work that you're doing to really, spread that information and to share that is so gorgeous. Yeah.
It's awesome to hear you, because I consider her more family than blood family, and to hear people talk about her like that really makes me happy. But I love hearing how she's touched different people. And she tells a story that back in the 70s, when she was just starting all this, she had her familiar, her cat, was stuck in a tree. And this was before, people were really outspoken, even in Salem, about it. And she called like the fire department several times, the police department. Nobody would come out and help her. So she finally called a news outlet and said, "Hey, I'm Lori Cabot. I'm a practicing witch. My familiar is stuck in a tree. Can you get somebody out here?" And everybody, it was just, so when she told that story, I was like, to be that, just to be that bold and brass and just be like, this is me, and I really don't care what you think about it, has, like you said, inspired a lot of us. And we had, in my opinion, the Silver Raven Wolf, the people that had done the books and things that, like you mentioned, we would go to the libraries to check out. Rania doesn't remember all that, but yeah. So there were things like that, but to be so public, to have a storefront, to be doing interviews on news channels, to teach at a college, it's impressive. And it definitely opened the doors for not just Cabots, but people in general, to live this kind of life.
All witches, I think that's exactly what I think. It's not just Cabot witches that benefit, of course, Cabot witches benefit, but all witches everywhere owe a debt to her, really owe a debt to her. And I think I could even say people of all faiths owe a debt to her, because she's practicing freedom of religion in the US. And that is so important, that we have representation of all spiritual paths, not just, the big three, right? That everyone is represented. And the fact that she was so bold and so courageous and was willing to be the point of, positive attention and negative attention. And she didn't care. She was like, I'm just going to put it out there and be myself so that others are free to be themselves. And that is just, that is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so she will always have a very big place in my heart because of that, Well,
that's awesome. Rania and I both, when I was in New England, because I'm not anymore, it was very freeing, having grown up in the South, that I could walk into an interview at a job and be like, "Oh, what's your religion?" "Oh, well, I'm a witch." "Oh, okay, that's cool." And never bat an eye.
Yeah.
But now I'm back in the South, and the Bible Belt, the buckle of the Bible Belt of the South. And it is interesting, but because of what we just discussed about her, it has given me, I still wear my pentagrams proudly. And, I have conversations. Rania and I had a video chat while I was on the beach one day, and a guy walked up to me very angrily afterwards, and, "This is a family beach." And I was like, "Yeah." And I'm not quite sure why you're so mad, but we had been talking about the gods, Greek mythology, and not even magic or witchcraft, but that's how offensive people find it here. So I had a good laugh with him and wished him on his way. But
yeah, I think, as I look at that, I see, Mike, for you, it's like you had that initiation, of course, initiations, but in terms of initiation into that activism, witch activism, and now you get to carry the torch. So if you choose, not everyone is, needs to be an activist, it's fine. You can do other things, right? But you displaying displaying a pentagram, wearing a witchy thing, wearing a t-shirt, all of that. Remember what Lori did for others. You're doing that for some closeted witch in the South.
Yeah.
You're doing it,
That's a good way to look at it. So.
Yeah. So that you someone who's, a pagan or Wiccan or can practice freely. So you get to decide if that day you're going to wear a witchy thing or not. You don't have to always be an activist 24/7, but your activism down there by showing up and wearing those t-shirts is has a ripple effect, and it will free someone else. You're freeing someone else down there when you do it. So
It's a
good
good
on
way to
you.
look at it. Yeah, I mean, and for Rania, the same in Greece. I mean, we have to pick and choose and be careful. But yeah, and she'll tell you this. I like to stir the proverbial cauldron anyway.
Oh, good. Then you're a
Especially,
perfect activist.
especially when I know that I have a good foundation or point to stand on. Like I like doing controversial. I did a topic once on this show, and it was very loved and very hated at the same time. But it was basically talking about. It was the gist of it was more or less okay. So we want quality, even in witchcraft. We realize there's a feminine and a masculine, that it's a duality in all of us. And we say that we acknowledge that there are male witches, because that was a big point that I started this show on, to let people know that we exist. And I said, you say that there are male witches, but every shirt, every meme, every post is solely about the feminine, never the duality in it. It's always a picture of a female witch. I was like, now, before it was bad enough as a male witch to always see that. So even though people say, yeah, we acknowledge you, you don't feel acknowledged fully. But now there are so many different genders and identities and everything else that it's just, I was like, it's offensive. It's offensive, in my opinion, to constantly put that stuff out there. Well, it got a lot of comments. Like, people agreed with it wholeheartedly. And then there were a lot, and they tended to be like in some of the group. I used to do witch groups on Facebook years ago. I gave that up a long time ago because Rania and I were talking about it recently. There seems to be a lot of gatekeeping and a lot of things that I don't really feel witchcraft is about inside these groups, because there's not a whole lot of control over what people say and do. And I was in one time where they basically ousted me, told me that men had no place in witchcraft, and this and that. And so that was why I started the show. But yeah, I'm getting off topic, but I enjoy stirring the pot. I enjoy putting things in people's heads that make them think, whether it's something that makes them happy or not, if it's something that needs to be discussed. And you do that too. Your post on Instagram and Facebook, particularly lately with the Ukrainian theme and everything else and what's going on there, are just amazing. I mean, first of all, I don't know if you have like a professional photographer or whatever, but you do all these like graphics and stuff that are just very appealing to the eye, but at the same time powerful in a way. You got one where you look almost like a phantom or something just floating in the air, and it's just very like, when I saw it, I was like, the heck is that? Something? No, that's Madame Pamita. Okay, so I like doing things that catch people's eye or catch them off guard or kind of make them question what they think is reality, if that makes any sense.
Waking people up. Well, I give a lot of credit. I mean, I show up for a photo shoot, and there's makeup people, and there's a great photographer that make me look super glamorous and amazing. I bring a bunch of clothes and magical things, and we show up and we have a collab and we make these pictures. And then I have my dear friend Buchanan, who helps me with my Instagram. I mean, I'm very active on Instagram. Definitely all the Ukrainian posts are coming from me, but like if it's promoting something in the shop or something like that, Buchanan helps me with that. And so I have lots and lots and lots of help. That's how you get things done. Everyone goes, how do you do so much? I go, I got lots of amazing help. That's how I do so much. And amazing people around me, amazing team. We all work together, and it's, I give them all the credit because they do work so hard, making candles, shipping orders, doing all kinds of things, helping with my, getting the word out about things. But I am very active on Instagram, and I like to repost other people's things, share things. I love that format. I wish it were the old Instagram, but the pre-meta Instagram would be that would be lovely, but who knows, maybe there'll be another platform that shows up like that. But so that's how that happens. That's how the magic happens. It happens because there's a coven, right? My coven of my people that we work together. So Yeah.
What's awesome to hear you say that, because and that's kind of what this has started, adding Rania and then adding Michelle and Ellie. It's become more or less, I got a download. Rania and I will call them downloads, awake messages, whatever. But I got a download from my patron deity that was just more or less like, I'm taking this places now that you're not going to be able to handle on your own. And so I added Rania, and then it was clear that I needed to add a couple more. And now I'm even kind of being told, and I'm glad to hear you say that you have relinquished a little bit of that on your end, because I'm kind of feeling like I need help with the social media aspect of it. But I'm a control freak, and so it's really hard for me to give stuff like that up. But seeing that you're able to kind of do that, maybe that's something I need to do as well. But that's awesome.
Yeah.
Rania is also a candle maker. She has that in common with you. We're not going to say too much, but she's about to start doing some things with candles for the masses. And we're going to team up on a box together coming up soon, which, if you ever want to join in, we would be absolutely honored to do. But yeah, we're thinking in the summertime we're going to start a bi-monthly subscription box, and she's going to make candles and I make amulets, and here we have hagstones galore from the ocean. So
good.
Yeah, so I do a lot with that, and so yeah, she may end up picking your brain on some candle stuff as it goes.
Yes. Welcome to the Sisterhood of Candle Makers. Oh my gosh, I have such a network of other candle makers, and we all just are, help each other, because believe me, candles will make you crazy. It's always this wick worked last week. Exactly. This wick worked last week. Now it's not working on this. Like, oh my gosh, it's like crazy. Yeah. So, that's amazing. I love that. I love that so much. Oh, it's fabulous.
A lot of our class, we did 1 and 2 together, and a lot of our class, we kind of clicked with everybody, but there was just this one group where we just all vibrated very highly together, and we've stayed close. And that entire little group is very active right now. You've got one making spell bottles, you've got one doing tarot readings and house blessings, and you've got Rania with the candles, and I have Dark Woods Witchery, where I make like magical milk baths and body butters and things like that. So everybody, and we were just talking about this recently, and I'd love to hear your take on it. But we feel that being in the beginnings of Aquarius, more or less, that witches as a whole are just being awakened and called to kind of do whatever it is they do to help the people, to help the world, to heal Earth and everything else. And it's been like that over the years, but just in the last couple of years, in my opinion anyway, it seems to have been way more. So I'd love to hear both of your opinions on that.
The awakening of all of these. I think that this is like, you just hit it on the head by saying that this is the Aquarian age, which is cutting edge, leading edge, innovative, stretching further. We're leaving the conservative, kind of old school, and moving into this more electric, innovative, technology based, for sure. That's Aquarian as well. Era where, as we were just talking about before, we could have, we can share information so easily. We can meet from all parts of the world, like we're meeting right now, and meet together and get together. This didn't exist 20 years ago. This didn't exist. I mean, it's like a blink of an eye, and all of this stuff has sprouted into being, where gatekeepers, as you were talking about gatekeeping, I think about art. I'm an artist, creative person, as you all are too. And I can remember in my youth, you had to get someone to approve of your whatever for you to be able to make it, right? So like, as an artist, you had to get a gallery to take you on for people to see your artwork. There was no other way. I mean, few ways to share it. If you were a witch, you had to find a book that someone had published or if you wanted to publish a book, you had to find a publisher to publish it. Now we can do self-publishing. You can write a blog, you can do your own podcast, you can create your own content on YouTube. You can do all of these things where there are no gatekeepers, which is a good thing and also sometimes not a good thing.
True.
We get a lot of disinformation, propaganda, and things out there that are floating around because of it. So what we have to be empowered is to have an ability to discern, to what is real and what is fake. And that is a witchy skill, right? That ability to discern or sense or intuit what's true and what's not true. So you have to develop that. If you have this free open space where anything can be out there, you have to be able to see. You have to be able to see past the illusion and to see the truth. So I don't think that critical thinking has been taught a lot. And so you have to develop critical thinking. You have to be a skeptic. When people are like, when I was doing tarot readings, I'm not doing tarot readings much anymore, but if you're doing tarot readings and what if you get a skeptic? I'm like, I embrace a skeptic. I'm a skeptic. I want to see, if I'm going to believe in something, I want to see that it actually works, I'm not going to believe in something just because someone says I should believe in it. I need to test it. Right. So if I test it and it works for me, doesn't mean that it's going to work for you or everyone else, but my personal path works for me. I try something out and I'm like, does it fit me? Does it not fit me? Does it work? Does it not work? And if it works for me, great. I take it on. If it doesn't work or doesn't work for me, I don't take it on. That kind of critical thinking, that kind of discernment is necessary in this era, in this age now. We need to look at something with a skeptical eye. So when someone said, are you afraid of reading for a skeptic? I'm like, no, those are my people. Yes, they need to sit down and be like, okay, do a reading for me. And if it works for them and they see, wow, that person has a real gift, they will be more of more dramatically supporting what you're teaching or showing than someone who just takes the pill, who just says, yes, everything you says is true. I want people to say, test it out, what I teach. I don't want people to just say, oh, it works. Just test it, see if it works,
That's what I do with reading. Yeah, the skeptics, they're the favorite. They're my favorite.
And I've had, Rania knows this, but tarot is like more, I guess, a hobby of mine because I am such a control freak and I am a theologian and just a sponge for knowledge. I want to know all the things about everything. And with tarot, you can't do that. That's a multi-year lifetime process. And so I'm capable, but it's not my forte. My forte would be like pendulums and particularly seances. So when I get a skeptic at a seance, that's what I really love because my seances aren't table tipping. They're 4 legs off the ground seances. And to see someone shit their proverbial pants when they're at something like that is empowering and fun. I'll just be honest, it's fun. I like seeing people get scared. So, but yeah, I had to do the same thing for my girlfriend. She is a scientist. She has a master's in environmental science, a master's in biology. She's brilliant. I have no clue how I landed her. It has to be the personality, because it's certainly not the looks, but she's awesome, but she's a very scientific, critical thinker. And so she sees what Reverend Mother teaches as the science behind the witchcraft. She sees like what we're talking about and quantum physics and all these things that are actual scientific fact, but she still needs to be proven. So I take great pleasure occasionally. I'll be like, hey, check this out. I just did such and such, wait till tomorrow. And then something happens. And while she can't prove it, it still blows her mind. And after enough time, as I'm sure the people around you and around Rania have noticed, it's kind of irrefutable after a while. So it's pretty fun.
It's rewarding.
It's rewarding and it's fun.
In a way.
You get to say, I told you so, right?
Well, yeah. And seeing the look of someone's mind blown is just kind of interesting to me. So yeah, but we're getting, and we do this on this show all the time. I don't know how your podcast is, but I go off on tangents all the time here and have to circle back around. So
totally.
And normally Rania's the one that catches me, like, all right, you were talking about this. But so back to like your origin story. So after, as a 10-year-old girl, you get to go to Salem and everything. And this was pre-Salem now. I mean, now Salem's been taken back by the witches and reclaimed, rightfully so. But at the time you went, it was still not. So what led you from that age to, I guess what I'm trying to figure out, what came first? Kind of the chicken or the egg type thing. Was it writing book? Was it, creating spells and candles?
So that you're getting into digging in very deep. So, and I like it. So in my teens and my 20s, I started finding little bits in my teens, and then in my 20s, books started being available. And of course I was able to drive to a bookstore and go get a book and find things and so on. So I think that I did a lot of, spiritual searching. I remember being in my early 20s and going like, I almost felt like, if you ever watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I felt like Richard Dreyfuss. Like, where's that damn mountain with the top chopped off? I'm obsessed with it. And I kind of felt like I was looking for, actually looking for like training in witches and, really to get some training. And I was fortunate to find some women here in California that I began circling with and began learning and studying with. So I actually found teachers then in my 20s. And it was Wicca. I was practicing Wicca at that time. And then after that became very solitary practice. I just sort of like, I think I learned what I could, and then sort of felt like, well, now I need to customize this to more who I am. And so by doing that, then I became very solitary. So I was practicing magic on my own, candle magic on my own. But, in Wicca and the way I was taught, you would do it yourself. I don't know if it was the times or it was just the practice. You would do candle magic for yourself, but you wouldn't do candle magic for other people. You might do candle magic in a coven, in your group, but you wouldn't necessarily in Wicca do a spell on behalf of someone else. And it was when I was introduced to hoodoo that I learned really the idea that you could do candle spells or magic for other people and influence other people and do kind of sympathetic magic, influential, influence magic and things like that. So that then became a part of my practice. And so I love hoodoo so much. It's African-American practice. It's beautiful. It's folk magic. And I really found that I think that hoodoo led me to really my true love of folk magic. And so really getting into folk magic, low magic in such a beautiful way. And it became really grounded, it really grounded my magic. So then from there, I began learning more about folk magic. Well, I would say, even before hoodoo, I was learning about, Celtic folk magic, because there's lots of information about Celtic practices. But my Ukrainian magic really there wasn't anything out there. And when the internet started, I began looking and searching for what my grandmother was doing, like trying to find more information about it, because my grandmother died before I was born. So I was getting secondhand information from my mom. So my mom would say things like, oh, when I was a little girl, I was very sick and my mom made me a doll and she put the doll in bed with me. And then I got better and the doll was gone. And I'm like, well, was that my grandmother just making a doll to entertain the little sick girl in bed, or what was this? And I couldn't find any information in the beginning of the internet, wasn't finding any information online. And then when my friend Katie Karpets, who has a shop in Canada, she's Ukrainian Canadian, she has a shop in Canada called The Witchery. She and I met, we were both like, hey, we're Ukrainian witches. Oh, that's awesome. She and I both she discovered, and then I found out from her that there was this book called The Word in the Wax, which is about the Ukrainian wax healing technique, documented in English by a Canadian researcher. So it was a research paper, like somebody's research paper for master's degree, right? And they turned it into a book. And I found it and I was like, oh this was like the key. You know those moments as a witch, those moments where when somebody puts the key and you unlock the door and it's like the cave of wonders in there. That was the key that opened the cave of wonders for me, the open sesame that opened that, if you want to mix metaphors, But then when I found this and I'm like, that is what my grandmother was doing. This documents it in detail and gives the incantations and shows the techniques and tells what other people are doing. So I had thing, and I as a spiritualist, I believe my grandmother really led me to do this, because in Ukrainian magic, the Baba Sheptucha, which is the grandmother whisperer, which is the healer, will pass that tradition on either to her daughter or her granddaughter. So this is a very, it's a very gendered thing, it is. It's grandparent to grandchild, grandmother to granddaughter or daughter, right? It's very divided, sort of like this kind of work is women's work, right? So I feel like my grandmother's spirit was pushing me to do this. And then again, pushing me even further and further into writing I'd already had a connection to Baba Yaga, but really getting me deeper into that and to write this book about Ukrainian magic so that I could share this information and empower people and share our beautiful culture with the world, which had been so hidden and so suppressed. And that whole 80 some years of the Soviet Union, people were being killed, Ukrainians were being killed, slaughtered, intellectuals, anybody that was sharing, any kind of cultural information was either absorbed by, the Soviet Union or was completely shut down. Or, there were museums, for example, of pesanki, which are the talismanic eggs, the decorated eggs. And that practice was an ancient practice going back thousands of years, way before the birth of Jesus. This goes back to Trypillian culture, which is 5,000 years old, right? So that decorated egg concept existed in really that Eastern world, I'm sure in Greece too. We talked about this earlier, about the decorated eggs in Greece and the decorated eggs in Ukraine. There were museums of these beautiful decorated talismanic eggs destroyed. And we're seeing that now in Ukraine now, that they're destroying museums. Why? Why are they bombing a museum? Why is that a target, military target? Because they're trying to destroy the spirit and the culture. They're trying to destroy the culture. They're trying to destroy the people. That's it. I mean, why are you bombing a museum? Come on.
That's why they go to religious meeting places. That's why they go after museums and schools. And, it's just to destroy the spirit of the people, because you destroy their spirit and they won't fight back. So.
But it's making Ukrainians more effing determined. That's all it's doing. And the world, really.
Is awesome. I mean, and because I'll go ahead and say it, this show's marked explicit, and as I said, I like to stir the cauldron. Fuck Putin. Yeah. I mean, and if anybody that's listening to this show disagrees, fucking unfollow me right now.
Same.
Exactly.
But I think it's awesome. But that's a very cool origin story. And that can't even be all of it. But that's
oh my gosh, that's not even getting into the tarot thing. So you were asking kind of like, how did I become more public? I guess you were kind of saying the books, what came first. So I got sort of on a tangent like you, Mike. I like to go rambling down that rabbit hole.
It fits right in on this show.
But so what happened was I had a very private practice. I really was like practicing for myself, practicing with my coven, then practicing totally solitary. And then what happened was, and I had kids, and having kids is like, you're then focused on the kids and stuff like that. It's hard to really, really develop something when you're raising a family and doing that. But what happened was that I was a musician. Publicly, I would, this was my hobby. I wouldn't say I made a living at it, but I had some bands over the years and we would perform. And I got really into jazz music from the 1920s, American jazz from the 1920s and 30s. Beautiful pre-war jazz, hokum, which is like comedy songs and things like that. And I really became super fascinated with this era of music and how it was such an interesting time musically, because it was the first time really music was being recorded. And so they didn't really know what they were doing, and all kinds of things were being recorded. Phenomenal, amazing, crazy things are being recorded. So you find these really weird comic songs, all kinds of stuff like that, right? So I got really fascinated in being like this song hunter, and I'd find things on archive.org, like these old wax cylinder recordings and things like that. So I started learning to play other instruments. I was a bass player. I learned to play ukulele and banjo and all these old acoustic instruments. And I said, I want to do like a little vaudeville show. What can I do? I want to do something fun and interesting, interactive, has some, fun elements to it, and do it like a cabaret show. So I said, oh, well, I know how to read tarot cards. Why don't I do a thing where we have, a bunch of tarot cards and we have a different song associated with each card, and we'll have audience members come up, they'll pick a card, and then we'll I'll tell a funny fortune, like a funny quick fortune for them, be, super magical, mystical comedy kind of thing. And then we'll do an old 1920s song, right? So we started doing that in LA, and I did it actually in England. I went to England doing the show, and it was called Madame Pamita's Parlor of Wonders. Pamita was my name in my previous band. The Neptunas was my old band. And my name was Pamita. Pamela is my given name, but Pamita was my nickname in the band. And so I said, well, I'll be Madame Pamita. And so I started doing the show. Now, up until this point, I had only done tarot readings for myself, my friends, lots and lots of times. I've been doing it for decades at that point, but I was always very private with my practice. I didn't want people criticizing, and I never in my wildest dreams would think, oh, I can be a tarot reader or have this business. Like you said, Mike, never in your wildest dreams, right? So then doing the show, people would say after the show, can you do a real reading for me? Can we just over here in the bar corner of the bar, can you do a reading for me? Can you come and do, tarot readings at my Halloween party? So it turned into a business because I was doing this music act and people were asking me to do a business. And so that's how I got started with that. And that's how I got started with Madame Pamita. And then I started, like, when I wrote my first book, the tarot book, I'm like, should I keep the name Madame Pamita or should I use my given name Pamela Moore? Should I use that? Which one should I use? And the Judica Illis, who is my editor, she's like, just use your magical name. It's like a cool fortune teller name. You love that old time thing. This is you. So I said, okay, I'll keep on trucking with that. And so that really solidified that. So that's how all of this happened. It was just like you, Mike. I didn't go like, I'm going to be a podcaster, right? Like you never went, I'm going to be a podcaster. It's just the doors open and you step through the door, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm a Cancer. I'm a cardinal sign. It's like, open the door, I'll walk through it, So, and I always listen, it's not 100% a win every time. There's many doors I've walked through and I'm like, oh, I think I go in and out again. Like, that wasn't a door I needed to walk through. So, but you try things and then things work. And then if it works, it opens another door and you do that thing and then that works and you do another thing. So, yeah. So that's how that got started. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that Judica convinced you to keep the name because the name's awesome. And she is too, by the way.
She's the best.
Go ahead and give a shout out to her.
I love her.
Yeah. I told Branya when I started this show, I made a list of authors and things like that I wanted to have on the show eventually. You were on that list. Christopher was on that list. She's on that list, and some others too. So
I love Christopher too. He's the best. I love him so much.
I told Rania, it was funny. Our recording ended up lasting about 3 hours because we just kept getting sidetracked and just talking. And yeah, he's awesome. But yeah, I love the fact that kept the name because people have magical names, and this because you wrote a foreword for another person that I love, Storm.
Love that book. Oh my God, that book's so good.
It's sitting right over there actually, but yeah, I mean, you can have a witch's name that you get really deep and use all the processes that he goes through in his book to come up with, but a name that you just have that embodies who you are can be just as magical in my opinion. So yeah, I think it's awesome. So I'm assuming, which I didn't know that about you. That's really cool about the cabaret show. Yeah,
you can go on YouTube if you dig really. I mean, if you look up Madame Pamita, you're going to mostly end up with, videos on how to do a candle spell, or podcast recordings. But if you go dig, and you look on page 3, 4, and 5, you'll find pictures of me cute and skinny and young doing this cabaret act. So much fun. And I sometimes pop it out once in a while, I'll do it once in a while, but it's just a really fun, funny, kooky thing that I used to do. And I love the music still to this day, this old vintage kind of music, which is very magical. Harry Smith, about Harry Smith, the occultist, and he loved all that old weird American music, and I feel like I found out about him through music. Like when I was looking and researching this music, I'm like, what's this occult and old time music connection? And I was like, oh, I'm on the same wavelength. I'm like, oh shit, this is like, I see it so clearly, this authentic, strange, it's folk magic, right? Mm-hmm. Music is another form of folk magic. In Ukrainian magic, I mean, we can go now back to that. I'll keep talking about that. But in Ukrainian magic, we sing when we do creating magical talismans. Singing is part of it. So you'll see videos now, which is like, it brings me to tears, of people, women and children mostly, weaving camouflage nets. So you weave the net and do this. They're singing as they do that, because singing and weaving go together. Singing and weaving go together because you're singing your spell into the thing as you're weaving it.
Everything I do, I haven't done it much lately, but I sew. I'm a rare breed that I'm a guy who loves sew. I use mostly machines, but I can do it by hand. And I make tarot mats and all sorts of things. And I don't sing when I do it, but I basically chant certain things as I'm doing it, because vocal sounds and resonance music has its own energy, and energy is magic. And yeah, I'm a firm believer that times when I have a really bad day and I'll just throw some earbuds in, and 10 minutes later, you know, I'm fine. It's about like going into alpha level and just kind of getting yourself centered. So yeah, and jazz is just, I'm a huge music lover anyway. If you were to listen to my Spotify, it's one of the most eclectic musical collections. I mean, I have country, classical, jazz, blues, but yeah, jazz and blues are two of my favorites. My dad was a professional recording artist, musician for most of my life, and I got kind of a love for music through him because of that, and it's just kind of remained. So hearing you touch on that is really cool.
Oh, I've got a great music magic spell. Do you want me to share it with you?
Oh, I would love to. Yes.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna love this. So think about this: when music is vibration, right? Mm-hmm. So when you, like, let's say a car goes by with a big thumping bass, or I used to use the analogy that only old people will remember, when the parade would go by and the big bass drums, right? So anything that's really so when those loud, low, big waves come at us, we can feel it in our body, right? Your body shakes when that big thumping bass goes by. Well, all sound, high, all tones, high and low and anything in between, is vibrating your body, right? So you can put an intention into music that you create, words that you say. I mean, this is why spells are powerful. That vibration of sound is vibrating the person who's hearing it as well. So when I would do a performance when I was doing Madame Pamita's Parlor of Wonders performance, right? I used to have a moment before I'd go on where I would do an intention. I want to bring peace to everyone, or I want to bring joy to everyone, or I want to bring healing to everyone, or I want to bring happiness to everyone, whatever it was, right? And I would just come with that intention, and I would infuse my performance with that intention. So it didn't matter if I was singing a kooky song or a funny song or a sad song or a poignant song. The intention would go out and permeate the people, get into the body of the people. It didn't matter to me if they were sitting there talking at the bar, making out in the corner, eating their dinner and chatting, or paying attention to me, because they were still receiving what I was sending out. So you can use that concept of vibration and sound to work on yourself, to work on other people, to work on things, to infuse things using sound, bells,
chimes,
bowls, chimes, bells, music, recorded music on Spotify or wherever you are. You can use music to make magic as your medium for magic, and it permeates your body. It's like drinking a potion without having anyone drink a potion, right? Mm-hmm. What does a potion do? You're permeating your body with that essence of that infusion that you put your energy into, of like love, healing, whatever. And now you can do that with music without anyone even knowing you're doing it. You can be so sneaky with it. So hopefully you use your sneaky magic for good.
Yes.
Well, we're all about sneaky magic. Rania knows this, and I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on it. You pointed out your love of hoodoo, and I, up until becoming a Cabot priest, was always very eclectic. My grandmother was a witch, but more so in the folk magic, I would say probably closest to Appalachian type things. But I grew up living a duality and all, living a dual life. I would go to Southern Baptist Church on Sundays with my mom's family, and I would be learning witchcraft secretly, because everybody knew my grandmother was psychic. She would have dreams. She dreamed when I was being born, before cell phones even existed, and showed up at the hospitals. I mean, they knew that she did all this stuff, but no one ever called her a witch.
Right.
No one in the family talked about it. My granddad wasn't super religious, but also had just ingrained in him that that was bad. So she never really talked about it around him. I'd have a wart, she'd rub an onion on it, say some words, bury it in the yard, the wart would go away, things like that. But it was interesting because I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, too, which has a huge Gullah community. And down here we call it Geechee. So very, very similar to hoodoo. And so I got to work with a lot of people that were into hoodoo. But yeah, so I had it was kind of like a blending or a fusion of hoodoo and folk magic and witchcraft, what I could glean from books in the library or things like that. And it was different. Like when I came into, I had never found a tradition to where I guess like it felt right until this one. And I think the reason was because it wasn't just about, well, we've done this since, our lineage went back into blah, blah, blah. It was more just, well, this is the science behind it. This is how you do it. And I'm going to teach you, and it made sense to me from an analytical point of view. So again, got off on a little bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to say I love it when I talk to people who have like an eclectic blending of magical learning and styles.
No, I think it's like, I think really we have a very interesting, I would say, maybe American worldview, maybe Western worldview that like pigeonholes or tries to put people in a category, right? When the reality is it's a journey, right?
Yes.
Your spiritual practice is not like I'm this thing. It can be that I'm this thing. I mean, maybe you fit in so neatly into some category that you can just say that. But for most people, I would see there being an evolution and a journey. So you started, with folk magic, and then you went into tradition, and, who knows where it's going to lead you or what's going to happen. I always see my spiritual journey as always being a pathway that I am, I may come to a fork in the road and I go, ooh, that way looks really good. I'm going to go in that direction. And then from there, you go into something else and you learn something else. So I really actually want to say that I thank people that would say to me, hey, you're white and you're practicing an African-American thing. Nobody has come at me saying you're being disrespectful or, anything like that. No one has ever said that. But people would say like, what's your tradition? Like maybe explore your tradition. And that pushed me into having to do the hard work. Was really effing hard work to find information about Ukrainian magic. So I like having a little bit of pushback to me actually was a blessing. So it's not that I have abandoned hoodoo. I still do, I still make mojo bags. I still, there's lots of hoodoo that's involved and sort of permeated into my practice. But because of my journey, I've moved into like, I've moved a little further down the road, and I've actually pushed myself to learn about something that there was no information about in English, very little information about in English, and research and find and piece together things and construct things, reconstruct things, and to find this information out there. So I say blessings to people that sort of push us to do or to look at something. Just like you, Mike, look at something and you challenge people. I don't mind being challenged, and I don't mind examining and looking and saying, yeah, you're right. I looked at my Celtic side, that side was easy to find information about, but I had never really done the hard work of looking for the Ukrainian stuff because it wasn't readily available. It took me back. Actually, it was so interesting because when I was putting together my new book, which is Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, which is about Ukrainian witchcraft and magic, I felt the feeling that I had when I was in 7th grade and looking for magic. I felt like it was like an adventure. You had to really work hard. Same thing with music back then. You had to wait for the record to come out, or maybe they would play your band that you liked on the radio. It was so hard to get the music. Now everything is like push the button and you get whatever you want. But that joy of like the hard work of discovery, and then it feels like you're, finding a gold mine or finding, like I said, the cave of wonders after all your hard work. And so when you find that bit of information, it felt so glorious. And I got that. It was this beautiful nostalgic feeling of that time when so little was out there about witchcraft, and you really had to look really hard to find anything because so little was out there. And so
I remember that.
Yeah.
And it was, and I had a conversation recently with a friend of mine about this very same thing. It was empowering because when you found something, like you said, you had to dig, you had to search. But it was also exciting because some of the best knowledge, in my opinion, are the things that you really do have to spend a lot of time digging and differentiating whether this is right or this is wrong, or things that you can just, like you said, with music, you can push a button and have anything. Well, it's almost like that with magic now. You can go online and you have all this information. You don't really know offhand, if you're not versed in it, whether it's accurate or not, but things that are easiest to find are the things that aren't. And let me say that I don't mean this in all cases, but in many cases, I feel like are the things that aren't as powerful.
I think it's like the difference between a meal, like going to get fast food, and a meal you lovingly craft yourself, right?
Exactly.
Fast food will feed you. Fast food will get you through the day. Fast food will, and that, little meme about, candle colors, which I see all the time, this candle means this thing, you do this. Those things are valuable. I think they're helpful. I think they introduce people to things, but it's not going to really have the richness, the depth, the nourishment. I would even say the nourishment that something that you really work hard for has something really special, So